Immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he dismissed them, he went up on the mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. And Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink. Beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You have little faith," he said. "Why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. And then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God."
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Jan. We got there in the end. So, New Year. What does that normally bring for people? New Year's resolutions. Making people's lives. Last year, my brother, myself, and my sister, we all done virtual challenges. As you know, I completed 6 in the end. I won't go for them all, but we done a 13 miles between us. This year, it's not a resolution, but, oh sorry, this is my latest that's the Pacific Quest, which we finished Christmas Day, believe it or not. So I had to walk 6 kilometres to finish that on Christmas Day. That was our target, and that's what we achieved. So that was good. So this year, my brother said, "I'm going to start a new quest." He said, "I'm going to walk the Great Wall of China on my own, and virtually not." So it's I said, "Oh," I said, "I'll join you on that." He said, "Yeah, but I'm doing it on my own." I said, "Yeah." So we've given ourselves a year to do 2,613 miles. It's quite a distance. It's not a resolution, but it's a goal. And that's something that I want to achieve by the end of the year. I'm already 25 kilometres ahead of myself.
Praise the Lord.
That's good.
I'm surprised you found that many walls, Kenny.
That many walls, very good. I'm not going to be walking on any walls.
Oh, I thought you was going to China.
No. This is a virtual thing.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's just
because I didn't know there was cabbies along the way, on the wall.
So, we all have the experience of starting things with enthusiasm and then petering out along the way. So, I did a basic Google search on things we start but don't finish. I thought my little computer was going to have a little head bit. It came up with 1.42 million things that people have started and not finished. Here's a few of them. Anybody know what the top one is? Diet.
Going to the gym?
I've been on mine for 3 years.
So how many of us started a diet and then decided, yeah, this isn't for me, after 2 or 3 days? Yeah. It's workout plans, running marathons, reading books, writing books, there was just all sorts. Trying to sign up to any website was one thing for somebody with, yes. So, maybe you have resolved to read the Bible through a year, or memorize scripture, to give up destructive or sinful habits, to be generous, to start tithing, or giving sacrificially. I know church planters who have volunteered to go overseas but are having troubles. And now having trouble now staying with that church planting. Even right now, as you are listening to me, people are thinking about quitting things that they have started. So, this morning I want to talk to you about staying faith. The kind of faith that not only makes the commitment, but it sees it through. He told a story about two brothers, with which one of them he was more pleased. Not the one who made the promise, but one who saw it through. And so it is with us. It's not just making the decision that counts with God, it is seeing it through. Jan's read us Matthew 14, 22 to 33. I think it's one of the most famous stories in the Bible. Jesus speaking from the water. But it's rather infamous of a man who faltered in his faith. Peter. Everybody loves Peter because they think we see a lot of ourselves in him. He's a man big on promises, but short sometimes on execution. His aspirations are often loftier than his accomplishments. Peter, by the way, was not his real name. That was the name Jesus had given him. That meant rock. Simon was his real name. So we need to think of him this morning as two different people, trapped in the same body. Right before the crucifixion, Peter says, "I'll never deny you, even if everyone else does." That's the Peter part of him. Yet that same night, he denied Christ 3 times. That's Simon. Peter in Acts 2 is the first one to declare that God has included the Gentiles because God has included the Gentiles in the gospel. That's Peter, the rock. But later he refuses to eat with the same Gentiles because he is scared of what the Jews will say. That's Simon. Today we'll see a story which he says, "Jesus, if that's you, we will on water." He is the only one to show that kind of courage in that boat. That's Peter. Then right in the middle, once he gets out, he gets scared and he starts to sink. Now that's Simon. Peter's got a faith side to him and a fear side to him. In America, McDonald's have a burger called a McDLT. It's hot on one side and cold on the other.
Lucky.
It sounds very mucky. Peter's like that. He's got a hot side and a cold side. There's no lukewarm in Peter. I think we're all like that. You ever feel that you should have 2 names? Many years ago, in a dim and distant past, I used to have 2 names. When I used to work in Hardings, I was always known as Bert.
Yeah, I know.
For 20 years, I was always known as Bert. I know. And That's always stuck with me. Whenever I see anybody in parties, that they always say, "Oh, hello, Bert," and people, yeah, okay. Obviously, the two sides of me as Bert and Ken are the same. So thankfully, I don't have two sides in that respect. But I think I need to get a name that means rock, and another one that means perhaps not quite me. Let's think about something else. Perhaps it could be a pansy or a no. So 22:24, going through the story, Jesus just fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And immediately he sent the disciples to get into the boat to go before him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he dismissed the crowds, he went up in the mountain to pray. When the evening came, he was there alone. But the boat, by this time, was a long way out. Beaten by the waves, the wind was against them. He sent the disciples into a storm. Has anybody ever heard this line? The safest place to be is in the will of God. That's true, in a sense, but sometimes people confuse that to mean that everywhere God sends you is safe. It's easy, like a walk through a lovely rose garden. Here, the disciples obeyed the direct command of Jesus, and he ended up in a storm. As a result, you need to understand this. So when the storm hits you, you don't assume you're out of the will of God. Certain storms are part of God's will for you. Because God is not just doing something for you, he's doing something in you. In Acts 20:22 to 23, Peter says, "And now compelled by the Spirit, I'm going to Jerusalem, not knowing what will happen to me there. I only know that in every city the Holy Spirit warns me that prison and hardship await me." Paul understands that these trials to which he is referring to are part of the will of God for him. So when you make a decision in faith and it gets difficult, don't be surprised if you have an enemy that's immediately going to war against you. God is trying to test your resolve and deepen your faith. The biggest thing God is doing in your life is teaching you to trust him. Trust him. That's what we need to do. We need to trust in God. So faith usually leads us all through difficulties and not around them. Isaiah 43, verses 2 to 3 says, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they will not overwhelm you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned by any flame, and it will not consume you. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your God." We want a Saviour to take us around the waters, or over the bridge, over the waters. But God takes us through the waters to show that his grace is deeper than any water. His presence is stronger than the fire. He wants us to be able to trust him in any situation. Faith leads you through difficulty, not around it. So back to the story in verse 25. And the fourth watch in the night, he came to them, which means about 4 o'clock in the morning. So they've been on the lake now for about 6 hours. You know what that means? Jesus didn't come immediately. He let them fight the storm for most of the night before he came, walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him, they were terrified. They said, "It's a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, do not be afraid." So okay, let's talk about this for a little bit. So he didn't come to them immediately. And then when he did come, he comes strolling by at a distance, so close that they can see him and hear him, which in the midst of the storm had to be really close. But he does not come right up to them and hop on the boat and say, "It's okay, I'm here to save you." In Mark's version, he adds, he meant to pass them by. Jeff mentioned this when he spoke to us 3 or 4 months ago. He passed them by. How long? They're struggling for their lives, and Jesus' action basically issue, "I'll see you later," on the other side. But to get his help, never overlook human initiative in gaining the help of God as you struggle. He's there to help, but we have to ask. And I love this. They don't even cry out in faith. They cry out in fear, which is bad faith. But Jesus answers them. Do you know what that shows you? God is a compassionate Father who responds to his children when they call upon him. "Call upon me in the day of trouble," he says, "and I will deliver you, and you will glorify me." You find that in Psalm 50, verse 15. To continue the story, and Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." Notice here, Jesus did not fix the disciples' problems by making the storm go away. He just gave Peter another command. Come. When you are in difficulty, maybe you should stop asking God to fix the situation and start asking him what his command is. There is nothing wrong with asking him to fix the solution, but first ask him what his command is. Start demanding and start listening. So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water. He came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. Beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me!" There was a time for long prayers and a time for short prayers. This was a time for a short prayer. When you're sinking in the waves, short prayers will suffice. He just immediately reached out his hand, he's always close in difficulty, and took hold of him, saying to him, Oh, you of little faith. Why did you doubt? Why is this story in here? You should always ask that. The story is not there to inspire us to actually walk on the water. In Acts, when Paul is in the shipwreck, it never occurs to Paul to get out of the boat and start struggling to the shore. This story is to show for us how to continue what we start in faith. Because that's going to be one of the biggest problems for us as Christians. Initial faith is not enough. We need staying faith. When Jesus said to Peter at the end, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" He's not talking about the intensity of Peter's faith, but its duration. Peter's faith, when it started, was very strong. He was the only one, as I said at the beginning, who got out of the boat. It just didn't last that long. Initial faith is not enough. We need sustaining faith. We find staying faith at the same place we found the initial faith. So where did Peter's initial faith come from? Two places. First place, a vision of Jesus. When Jesus says, "Take heart, it is I," this is where I need Brendan. In the Greek it is ego eimi, is that correct?
Ego in me.
Ego emi, there you go. Which means I am. Which was the name of God. Don't be afraid, I am. Peter saw that the great I am was standing on top of everything that terrified him. And on top of those waves. And the second was Jesus' command. Peter figured that it was more important to obey Jesus' command than to focus on the circumstances. The great I am is on top of those waves. What he has said is larger than the wave. Peter is not so much walking on the water as he is walking the promises of God. He is not so much standing on the waves as he is standing in the character of Jesus. But it was then he took his eyes off those two things that he started to sink. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out. We focus on the word, we'll walk on water. Focus on the waves, we will wallow in it. The point of this passage is to demonstrate the greatness or the weakness. Sorry, to not demonstrate the greatness or the weakness of Peter's faith. The point is to demonstrate the greatness of God's grace.
Amen.
When I was reading the parallel accounts, I noticed that Mark's account didn't mention the part about Peter getting into the boat. Sorry, I'll read that again. When I noticed Mark's account, it didn't mention the part where Peter was getting out of the boat, not in the boat. One part about him sinking. Only about Jesus coming to them on top of the waves. As we all know, Mark was Peter's travelling companion. And the scholars tell us that the Gospel of Mark is essentially Peter's preaching. At first I thought Peter didn't want us to know about his wavering faith. Ashamed. But I think there's a different reason. Peter doesn't want to focus the faith on him. Because this story, not about Peter's faith, it's about Jesus' faithfulness. Peter wanted us to know that he is always close. When you call out to him, even if it is in fear and a lack of faith, he helps. Psalm 94:18, when I said my foot is slipping, your steadfast love, O Lord, supported me. Our God is a God who will always be there to catch us and pick us up and put us back and lift us up on top of the waves. So when you waver, put your eyes back on him. This story doesn't just give us an example to emulate, but to trust our Saviour. In this story, Peter may have failed at what he set out to do, but Jesus succeeded in proving exactly what he wanted to prove. He is always trustworthy. How much more should we see this on the side of the cross? There we see Jesus not only came to us in the storm, he took it into himself, the storm of God's wrath. He not only walked on the top of the waves, but soared over sin and death in the resurrection. Not only did he lift us on top of the waves, he filled us with the power of the resurrection life. And I know that if he had reached all the way down to hell to rescue poor old me from my sin, I know it'll help me when I stumble. Even if he reached out to save me when I was his enemy, it is certain that he will reach out to help me now that I am his son. Ultimately, God's purpose in the Christian life is to teach you to trust him. In 1 Peter, he writes to Christians going through their own storms. In this is 1 Peter 1:6. In this you rejoice, though now for a while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, and so that the tested genuineness of your faith may be found to result in the praise and the glory and the honour at the revelation of Jesus Christ. So initial faith is not enough. You need staying faith, and staying faith comes from that place that is the initial faith. So where does this leave us? You are in the midst of difficulties and the decisions of faith that you have made in the past. You started out well, but now you are faltering. Put your eyes and your ears back on the things that you were looking at when you first made that decision. And you believed Jesus was trustworthy, and you took a dare on him. You obeyed his command, and now things got difficult. That doesn't mean that Jesus has left us, or that you have made a wrong decision. He is testing our resolve and trying to deepen our trust in him. We embrace his character. We hear the command and take the next step. Think of Peter's faith in the first step. Isn't that exact same kind of faith he needed for the next step? Every little step is faith. We don't experience faith so much by sitting around and reading around but by taking the next step. The expression of faith is a step, not a dream. Getting to the end of your life and feeling like you walked on water is a result of a lifetime of swimming faithfulness. Is it what you want from your life, your family, your ministry? It's never the dreams you dream. It's the little decisions that you will make. That step of faith. The expression of faith is to step. So, together, let's take the next step. Maybe the next step will be your first step. I say that again. Maybe the next step is your first step. It may be a new thing that God is putting into you. If you want to walk on water, you have to get out of the boat. Every big finish begins with a small start. Jesus is close and compassionate, and he doesn't come to criticize any of us starting to walk in faith. And he's always here to help us.
Amen.
Father, we thank you for the things that you put on our hearts and our minds. Whatever goals or ambitions that you've given us, please give us the ability to have staying faith and not initial faith. Give us the ability to see things through. Give us the ability to hear your commands. As we go through this year as a church, we want bigger and greater things. We want to see our church grow. But we need to listen to you. Hear your word. Take it on board. Act on it. That way, we will see what you want for our church. We will see what you want in our lives. Just give us that ability to move away from that initial faith and have the staying faith for you. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.